Okay, we need to talk because one of the biggest cruise stories of the week is about a ship that I literally just got home from, and it involves something I warn about often here: pooping and puking and puking and pooping. Thankfully, not me. At least for now. Plus, another cruise line is bringing down the hammer and threatening parents with steep fines over kids breaking curfew. And there's a story about federal agents boarding a cruise ship and detaining the wrong person. And that last one is a lot more unsettling than it sounds. Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. Let's start with Holland America Line's Rotterdam, because yes, that Rotterdam is the ship that I literally just got home from off a 12-night Panama Canal itinerary. The itinerary was awesome, it was great, but in all my cruises, it finally happened. I was on a cruise with a confirmed Norovirus outbreak. Now, according to the CDC's vessel sanitation program, 81 passengers and 8 crew members reported symptoms consistent with Norovirus. I'm talking the puking and the pooping, vomiting, diarrhea, the whole thing. If you've ever been on a ship with enhanced cleaning and that protocol kicks in, you know exactly how fast the mood shifts. And as a passenger, we did notice it. Now, obviously the most noticeable thing was about 3 days before the end of our cruise, the captain came over the ship-wide PA system, which is very rare on Holland America Line, and made an announcement that there had been several reported cases of gastrointestinal issues among guests and that we needed to please make sure we wash our hands. Then the next day, I started to notice that at guest services, the pens were separated between dirty and sanitized, or sanitized. I don't know how well they actually clean them. I noticed at the coffee bar that all the self-serve stuff was completely gone. And then in the MDR for dinner, the main dining room, when I asked for salt and pepper, because there was none at the table, I was told I could not have salt and pepper, that they would have to salt and pepper and season our food for us and put sugar in my cappuccino. So the cruise line did what they could to try to prevent transmission. And I, of course, had to chat with guest services 2 days before the end of our cruise to try to get the scoop and the intel. And as of that time, they said that there were 26 reported cases. They said originally it started with 1, then 2, then 4. So it was interestingly kind of doubling every single day. And so when I checked, it was at 26. So come to find out, we ended up at 90. It stands to reason. Went from 26 to roughly 60 to 90. So Norovirus is no joke on a cruise ship. And I know that number does sound scary, but here is one bit of solace. That is still a relatively small percentage of the total people on board. Our sailing did continue. We didn't miss any ports of call. There were no onboard activities that were cut. We were just missing our salt, pepper, and our sugar. It had to be seasoned for us instead of letting us do it. Now, Holland did enact these mitigation efforts. I did notice crew more visible, cleaning and wiping down things like railways, but it otherwise was business as usual. I will say I'm a little disappointed that Holland America Line never notified us. We've now been home a couple of days. We never got any notification. I had to see this in cruise news world myself. And I got a little curious, knowing that I've been on an effective ship, what constitutes an outbreak? So I learned that there is this kind of 3% rule. So 3% of passenger and crew have to be impacted with norovirus symptoms, and not even lab tested confirmed norovirus, but gastrointestinal pooping and puking. And when that happens, cruise lines are required by law to notify the CDC. Now, unfortunately, cruise haters, they do love to say that I would never take a cruise. Cruises are just floating petri dishes. Okay, there is actually some truth to that. And norovirus, especially this time of year, it is not uncommon. So how do you stay safe? Well, one thing that I learned, I actually did not know this until I started researching it because I was on an affected ship. Alcohol-based hand sanitizer does not kill norovirus. Now, it's still helpful to sanitize because that can help with other things. Right now, there's a particularly bad strain of the flu going around, but norovirus itself is resistant to alcohol-based sanitizer. So your best line of defense is hand washing, hand washing, hand washing with hot water and soap. Wash, 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 wash more than you think you might need to wash. Definitely before eating, after eating. I even say in the bathroom, not just after the bathroom, before the bathroom. And I'm not talking a 5-second splash and dash, a thorough washing. And another mistake people make is hiding symptoms. They don't want to be quarantined to the room. And that actually happened on our ship. They confirmed that there were cruisers confined to their stateroom in quarantine. And I actually saw room service being wheeled to them by staff that were wearing gloves and masks. And I know cruisers don't want to be stuck in their room, but that's how outbreaks spread. It's really selfish to be out and about if you're having GI issues. So for me, what I do, I wash hands obsessively. I also avoid touching handrails. I know that's a luxury I have being an able-bodied person. I try to press elevator buttons with my sleeve or my elbow. And I know this is a little controversial, but I avoid the buffet at all costs. In my opinion, only the buffet is the central source of norovirus transmission because, friends, let's just say I've seen some things at the cruise line buffet. And even outside of sickness season, I find buffets as such to be pretty gross, and I avoid them if at all possible. But anyway, let's pivot to something a little more pleasant. Well, maybe not pleasant, but less gross, because this next story blew up for a reason. Carnival is finally cracking down on kids breaking curfew, and parents are being warned that repeated violations can result in fines of up to $500. And I'm talking about this happening just on the second offense. Now, this started circulating after onboard letters made their way to social media, and it triggered exactly the type of reaction you would expect. Parents panicking, some parents and non-parents cheering, Carnival fans saying, finally, and comment sections turning into war zones. Now, here's what's really going on. Cruise lines, especially Carnival, that always catches the heat online for bad behavior of their cruisers, they're under pressure from guests complaining about late night hallway noise, kids running amok, and feral packs of unsupervised children, and security incidents tied to minors, especially after curfew. And warnings and looking the other way and let kids be kids, that just was not working anymore. So apparently Carnival has introduced consequences that actually get attention. Now, I will say, these consequences are nothing new. Carnival's had policies and curfews in place for a long time, but what is new is the actual enforcement of it. They're finally walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Now, if you're a parent, I get why this feels aggressive. I'm a parent. I have a freshly turned 13-year-old. She loves having some freedom on a cruise ship, but I still keep her on a little bit of a tight leash. But I also get the other side. One family's idea of freedom is another cruiser's idea of zero sleep and irritation. Now, in some cases, Carnival's been a little draconian. There's one parent who reported on Facebook, I saw in the comments, so of course it's true, that she received such a letter when her child was out past curfew by 4 minutes. So the curfew is 1 a.m. The kid was out until 1:04 a.m. and she got this letter. So the letters they're circulating are making it very clear that we noticed this happen this one time. If it happens again, you're getting a $500 fine. And what's really scary is that if it happens a third time, you risk getting kicked off the ship at the next port and put on the no sail list. So they're taking this very seriously. I would not play around with this. Now, here's the practical advice. If you're cruising with kids or teens, curfew expectations, you gotta be crystal clear. And I struggle with this with my kid. You can't just be like vibes, come back whenever, come back when it feels late. You have to have really strict rules. And that is when you do let them out. And of course, as a parent, you have to decide how much freedom you're going to give. And that is a struggle that I also have myself. I wanna give her some freedom, but I also know bad things happen on cruise ships still. I report it here every single week. Terrible things, including sexual assault. So cruise ships are not these isolated safety bubbles. You're still around other people and human beings just can do bad things. And younger kids should not be out roaming the ship that late, period. At least in my opinion, you may disagree. So I wanna know what you think about these measures. Most people online do seem to agree that this is a good thing. Enough is enough. But it does create some heated debate. So let me know what you think down in the comments and let's talk ship, because this story connects directly to the next one. And this is where things get really uncomfortable. A U.S. Coast Guard veteran says that federal agents boarded a Carnival cruise ship docked in Miami and detained him in what he and his wife describe as a case of mistaken identity. According to reporting, agents entered their cabin early in the morning, handcuffed him, and removed him from the ship. He was held for about 90 minutes before finally being released. Now, Carnival's staying quiet. They just say it's a law enforcement matter, of course. They're not gonna say much. But this story messes with the sense of safety that people associate with cruising because your cabin feels private. It feels like a hotel room. But on a ship, especially during disembarkation, there is a very different legal and security reality. When a ship docks, customs, border protection, law enforcement, they all have very broad authority. And that is pretty concerning for people in this day and age where we're seeing a lot of government, in some people's opinion, overreach. We see a lot of actions from ICE. But the takeaway here, it isn't panic, it's preparation. So these things happening at disembarkation, they're not uncommon. What I always tell cruisers is that if you have a warrant, don't be taking a cruise, because at disembarkation, they're gonna get you because they run passenger manifests through customs and border protection. And if you have something, it's gonna get flagged. But in this case, this guy did absolutely nothing wrong. It didn't happen at disembarkation. It happened on the ship when he was in his room, and that is why cruisers are concerned. So I wanna know what you think about this and if it changes your idea about cruising. I know a lot of people are holding Carnival accountable for this and saying, I'm done with Carnival, I'll never cruise Carnival again. I personally don't really hold Carnival accountable for this because what are they gonna do, just deny law enforcement requests? But I wanna know what you think. Let's chat in the comments. And let's also switch gears because this next story taps into a totally different kind of emotion, kind of related to those feral packs of kids though. Oceania Cruises announced that it is moving to an adults only policy for new bookings effective January 7th. Existing reservations with minors made before then are still being honored, but moving forward, Oceania will welcome guests 18 and older only. Now, I find this interesting because, as I've discussed here previously, Carnival has been dabbling and experimenting with some adults-only sailings. They call them sea cruises, SEA, standing for Sailings Exclusively for Adults. Very cute branding. And they've had wild success with this. So much so that they've expanded these offerings significantly into 2026. So we're seeing mainstream American cruise lines dabbling with this, and now we're seeing other cruise lines move in this direction. So in the one sense, this isn't shocking. Cruise lines are having success with this approach, like with Carnival. And as you probably know, Virgin Voyages built an entire cruise line and brand on the adults adults only angle. Plus, Oceania tends to already skew older. They're more destination focused, they're more expensive, they're more food and culture driven. But making this official might signal something bigger in the industry. Cruising seems to be splitting. On one side, you've got these mega ships built for families with all these rides and attractions and roller coasters and water slides and adrenaline and chaos. And on the other side, you have a growing demand for quieter, chiller vibes, adult-focused experiences where people are paying to opt out of that big kid energy entirely. Now, if you're a parent, would you ever book an adults-only cruise for a grown-up trip? Even if you love cruising with your kids, I'll tell you right now, I love a kid-free cruise. I love my kids. I love traveling with my kids usually, but my Panama Canal cruise I just got back from, it was 12 days, very few kids because it was on a Holland America line. It was lovely. And then last month I did a Virgin Voyages adults-only cruise. It was also lovely. It's just a different experience. But if you're not a parent, I want to know if this makes you more likely to try a cruise line like Virgin Voyages or Oceania or Carnival's adult-only sailing options. All right, let's move to another story. I actually haven't seen this covered very much on social media, but I stumbled across it and I found it really interesting. In Arizona, Pittsburgh Steelers fans who booked a Steelers-themed cruise through a third-party promoter say the cruise was canceled and they're still waiting on thousands of dollars in refunds. And also, as someone that lives in Cincinnati, the story also caught my attention because let's just say I'm not a big fan of the Steelers, but my heart does go out to the cruisers that were impacted by this. It's just shady. Some of the people impacted report receiving partial refunds, others just a stream of empty promises and delays and kicking the can down the road. Now, this is a textbook example of where cruise excitement overrides risk assessment sometimes. When you book a themed cruise like this through a promoter or a travel agency that's selling it as a kind of a specialty cruise, your money may not be sitting with the cruise line. That means refund timelines and protections depend on contracts that most people never read. So here's my bit of advice. Pay with a credit card, specifically a travel card that gives you protections. I'll give you a link to my favorite go-to. It's the only one I use. It's Capital One Venture X card. I think it has great benefits, but it protects you in more ways than a standard payment or debit card can. And there is almighty power in the chargeback. Also understand who is actually holding your money. And if you're going to spend thousands of dollars on travel insurance can matter, but you have to understand what it covers. Event cancellations and promoter failures like this, they can fall into gray areas depending on how the trip was structured and promoted. So check your policy. And also I have a travel insurance guide for cruisers. I'll drop that down below. But as a travel agent myself, I want to remind folks, never, unless there's some legitimate reason and you have something in contract and writing, never pay a travel agent directly. Legit travel agents, when taking payment, we are never to take them ourselves. We're never to deposit payments in our personal accounts. We are simply a conduit between the traveler and the supplier, in this case, the cruise line. So we're supposed to take the payment, apply it to the cruise line directly. So if you see something other than that happening when you're working with a travel agent, that is a big red flag. But I want to say, while you do have to be careful to avoid shady travel agents, and common sense goes a long way, using a travel agent does have a lot of perks. So I recommend almost everyone in most cases use one, because using a travel agent services does not cost you anything more, and you get a whole lot of service at no extra cost, and you pay the same rate you would without using a travel agent. And sometimes they can even throw your way some extra perks. But be careful. Avoid shady looking TAs, avoid shady looking companies, especially if you're looking at a cruise promoted niche cruise like this with a sports team or a celebrity, because unfortunately this is not the first time this has happened, and it probably won't be the last. And this last story, let's talk nerdy, because this is for the cruise nerds, but it has real implications. I've talked a bit about some growing swell of gossip about Royal Caribbean possibly preparing to order a new class of mid-sized ships, often referred to as Discovery Class. Now, I want to stress, again, nothing has been officially confirmed, but the gossip continues to grow, and industry reporting suggests preliminary work may already be underway. Now, if this happens, it is a quiet shift. Royal Caribbean has spent years building a name in the biggest and the best ships in the world. You've got Utopia of the Seas, Icon, Star of the Seas, which I'll be on in April and I'm super excited about. But a move toward mid-size ships can mean some really beautiful things. It means more availability of more unique and different ports, unique and different itineraries like Panama Canal, where I just came back from, a total bucket list experience. Star of the Seas cannot transit that, and potentially a very different onboard experience. Namely, probably less kids, because they want those mega ships with the water slides and the roller coasters and the loop-de-loops. Mid-size ships can access places mega ships can't. There's more flexibility, there's less floating theme park. So I want to leave you with this question. If Royal Caribbean announced tomorrow that their next ships would be significantly smaller than the Icon class or even the Oasis class, would you be excited, or would you feel like they're losing out on some of that wow factor? Let me know down in the comments and let's talk ship.